right? But I also just really want to emphasize that in the amount of time, for example, someone's like, oh, that's a really cool book. Someone tells you about a cool book. You're like, oh, I should order that. The amount of time it takes to type it in your phone is about the same as amount of time as it takes to type it in Amazon and buy it, right? So same thing with like Twitter, right? Like if you have a thought, don't like just literally open Twitter and post it, right? Like you don't need to write it down and then go post it later. You're just adding an extra step of friction, right? So as soon as you have a thought, like if it's appropriate, send it to the person or just publish it, right? I think that's one thing that it just slows down execution when you don't just go directly. Like you could be making notes, and this is one thing that I train my assistant on because it's just, she does all these little things all the time. And even as entrepreneurs, like even if you have 100 people in your team, you still have to do small administrative things because that's just a part of life, right? Like I heard this somewhere. It was like even like the biggest entrepreneurs, like megapreneur people, like 30% of their time is on administrative stuff.
Welcome to Big Business Mistakes, hosted by Brandon and Kaelin Poulin. Here, the most successful entrepreneurs tell jaw-dropping stories and lessons behind their biggest business mistakes so that you don't make them. Ditch the fake highlight reel and get the raw truths and golden lessons of what it actually takes to scale your business from those who have done it. This is Big Business Mistakes.
Welcome back to the Big Business Mistakes Show. This is Kaelin.
And Brandon. What's happening?
I guess we can stop saying
Welcome
our
back.
last name now, you know? We're just Kaelin and Brandon now. Today, we're going to talk about the ultimate execution system. And this is something I brought to you. I was like, you're so good. Everyone always is like, Brandon is the executor. Like Russell Brunson says about it. I've never seen anyone. That's an executioner. But yeah, basically the same thing.
Kind of like,
cutting the heads off the task. But even like Russell said, like Brandon is the fastest executor I've ever seen. And so I was like, hey, what if we talked about your execution system? Like how things go from idea or conversation or meeting or just something someone says in passing to, or at an event that you hear to actually being put on the conveyor belt of our business to actually get done. So I'm excited to dig in because this is your superpower that you're going to share with everybody today.
Getting shiz done. That is my superpower. Mm-hmm. Well, I'm also like a 99D on Myers-Briggs, on DISC, which is like task, go. It's like in my DNA.
All task, all the time.
I'm pretty sure I rev at like 8,000 RPM all
that's
the
why
time.
Your like leg
like
is
this
jumping
is on my leg. You guys see my leg?
Never stops.
Yeah, like
that's how I know Brandon falls asleep at night. Is like all of a sudden, like his leg is like moving, and then all of a sudden his leg just stops moving, and I'm like, all right, he's asleep.
Yeah. Well, I think the most frustrating thing for me is that, and what I've realized is that you have all these great conversations with people. You go to events, you have meetings, and so like at the end,
you have thoughts
while
you're in the hot tub.
Yeah, or the shower. Worst place to have an idea because you can't write anything down. I haven't figured that one out yet. Maybe I'll put a whiteboard in my shower.
You need one of those little like waterproof cases that like suction cups to the wall and you put your phone in it.
Yeah.
And you can still touch it.
Oh, that sounds terrible. It's like, it would make sense too, but I'm not that insane.
Meanwhile, he's ordering on Amazon right now.
Number one hack, put a whiteboard in your shower. But I think the thing that frustrates me is that you have these conversations, you go to events, you have good ideas, and you have like that creative just boom, like it's like a text message in your head.
Like I should do that.
Yeah.
I need to do that.
Like, oh, I need to do that, or oh, that makes sense.
That's a great idea.
But if you don't write it down, like it's gone. It's just like, it's done. Gone forever. And you're like, oh, what was that thing? Right?
Yeah, and you're always like, I'll remember.
It's like the shortest pen, I think the saying is like the shortest pencil is better than the longest memory, right?
Something like that.
Yeah. Well, anyways, that's like, the whole thing was born out of that because I just watched like everyone's always talking, right?
Yeah. You're always listening to a podcast. You're always watching a video. You're always seeing a reel. You're always going to an event. You're always hearing a new
Or you're talking to
speaker.
your team, or you're talking to this person or that person.
Or we're having a conversation over dinner.
And I'm like, talk is so cheap. It's like, show me your actions and I'll show you who you are. And so this whole thing was just born out of my frustration because everyone's always talking, nobody's doing. And so this is the system to capture when ideas come, when actions present themselves, and then actually move them into being done through yourself or through your team, through your company, right? Or just however, right? And maybe it's stuff in your home, maybe it's stuff at work, in your company, maybe it's stuff for you personally. But if you don't have like a tactical system to move from idea to execution, then stuff just gets lost and it never gets done. And it's like, what a tragedy that like this great idea that could have changed the game for everything doesn't get done.
Yeah.
Right.
What's the opportunity cost and all the things that you've forgotten?
Yeah, exactly. It's massive. And so that's the whole idea of the ultimate execution system. And this episode is, how do you actually take it from idea to execution, right? So this is going to be super tactical, but it's also very practical that anybody can use. And it's not complicated, right? Yeah. It's not magic. It's just discipline.
It's not a bunch of like crazy softwares or like project management systems or any. It's like the step before the project management system.
Yes. Yeah. Yes, definitely. So I think the first thing is whenever I go to an event, right? Whenever I go to an event, a mastermind, or I'm studying something, whether I'm studying a book, right? You can read a book and it feels nice and there's a concept that might stick with you. But at the end of the day, like you're going to get ideas or actions out of whatever you're consuming the second you consume it. And then if you don't capture it, it's going to go away. So the first thing in the first part is that I am always looking for how can I apply this, right? Whether I'm reading a book, whether I'm at a seminar, whether I'm in a mastermind, or literally anytime, any place, I'm like, how can I apply this?
Yeah.
Right?
Looking for the action item.
Looking for the action that I can take right now. Because like if you're reading something and you're studying something and there's no like application that's coming out of it for you, like you probably don't have any business consuming it right now.
Unless you're reading it for fun and like it's a, fiction book.
Yeah, unless you're like into reading.
Because I also like to read those.
Yeah, unless you're like into reading fiction.
Yeah, relaxation is the outcome for me. That's the action I'm looking for.
Yeah, but if you're looking for like getting stuff done and moving your life forward.
I'm reading this book for this reason.
Yeah, yeah. So if you're studying something and you're trying to learn and execute on it, right? Like if you don't have actions coming out of it, it's like it's kind of probably just it really is just pleasure reading at that point. Like so that's the first thing is like whatever I'm consuming, if I start getting down the road listening to it or reading it and I don't have stuff coming up, I'm like, like this is leisure time now. So just making that distinction, like, sure, like
it's good.
If you like to read, Harry Potter books, like cool, like, but it's leisure time. So in growth time, in application time, and wanting to build, right, you should be getting that. So always looking for those actions. So there's really two parts that come out of me studying something. It's you have the notes, right? And you have notes. And the way that I take notes is I take notes with bullets, right? And then I'll bold like the first couple words or the first thought that really encapsulates it. And then the rest of it won't be bolded.
So give me an example of what that means.
Yeah. So for example, if I was to just take what I just said.
Send Kaelin flowers.
If I was to take what I just said and I was like, two parts, right? Note taking and airlock. And then I would be like notes and airlock, bold. And then I would like explain it. So I could easily go back and reference my notes and see like the gist of what it is without reading all of it. And also when you do bold, it just kind of separates in your brain. Like, when we get like jumbled text, like if you look at social media, people space out their posts, right? Because it's easier to read and consume. And so I take notes like that. I don't take long-winded notes. It's like very shorthand. I'll bold the important parts of the statement. And so that's the first thing. So I'm taking notes.
Where do you take notes?
I take notes in my iPhone.
Just your iPhone
In
notes
notes.
app?
In the notes app.
Nothing
That's it.
special?
Nothing special.
You don't pay like premium price for a secret note taking like
Nope. All right, you guys ready? I'm going to look this up. I have right now in my iCloud 4,045 notes.
Wow.
Right? So like I create a new note multiple times a day, and like it literally, for those of you guys watching a video, like it just goes forever, right? I've been doing this for a decade almost, right? And so one thing that's cool is that now you have a history of your entire career basically and all the ideas you ever had. So So I take notes on things. I'll categorize if there's like a very specific event or something, but I don't stress over like organizing everything because you could spend hours doing that.
Out of that 4,000 notes, though, there's one specific note that is pinned to the top.
Yes.
That is the note of most importance.
Yeah. So
what's that note?
So I actually have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15 pinned notes.
But tell me about the most.
It's kind of growing.
The airlock.
Yeah. I'll get to it. So there's like 15 pinned notes that are all like, I use emojis to separate them visually so I don't get like overwhelmed by it.
And those are like your notebooks.
And these are like the things that I revisit frequently that I'm using over and over again. Everything else is just like a log, right? It's just a log of whatever notes or information from the past, right? So if I'm prepping for a meeting, I'll make a new note, put it all in there, but I don't revisit that often, right? I can just search for it later if I want. So the most important note, so I talked about two things, right? Number one is taking notes with intention. And the way that you structure your notes is important because if you go back and like you don't understand what your notes were, you can't assimilate anything. The other thing is I take what's called basically action items, right? And so whenever I'm at an event, got notes, action items, and I do the little bubble. I love that little bubble so you can like check it off later.
Bubble,
yeah, like the checklist bubble. It's like
It's
dopamine hit, you know, you hit the bubble. Yeah. And so I'm constantly looking for the action items in whatever material I'm consuming. And I don't worry if like, oh, I don't have bandwidth to do that or I could do that next year. I don't worry about that, right? I just like, what's the action that I can apply out of this? And then I make the action. Now, when I'm done with an event, right, and it's kind of complete or it's over, I will then move those actions into a OneNote, which is like the top note on my phone, which is called the airlock. Okay. And the airlock, the whole idea behind the airlock is that nothing gets out of it. Nothing escapes. This is where like all great execution ideas, actions go to never get lost, they're there, they're locked in. Right. And so nothing escapes an airlock, right? Like not even air.
Yeah.
Right. That's the idea. Right.
Yeah.
And so if you can get it into the airlock, it's safe. And then, you know, hey, I've got this action in here. And so it's always going to be there. When I execute on it is a different question, right? But ultimately it's always in there. And so that's the biggest thing is like taking notes, moving them into an airlock. And so the airlock is basically like a to-do.
You only move the action items into the
Only
airlock.
the action items.
Yeah, not the notes.
Not the notes, just the action items. So I move them into the airlock and that's where they stay. Okay. And so the airlock, I organize it in categories, right?
Yep.
So I have like kind of the most important things at the top. And then I'll make different categories in the airlock based on like, hey, this is personal stuff. Hey, this is like home stuff for my house. This is kid stuff. And I'll even make, I'll make sections in the airlock. Like I'll do a big header and then put the actions for other people on my team.
Yeah. So you have like a marketing one, you had like an IT one, you had like a
assistant,
customer support one, assistant one.
Yeah. So my direct reports, my employees that I have, like, it will be an action that I will delegate to them later. And so that's the biggest thing with the airlock, right?
Well, what I love about this part that maybe like it's not easy to tell on the front, but what he means by putting assistant in there, and you have a Kaelin one too. So if it's something that he hears or sees or learns or thinks about, it goes in the airlock under my name or like under our assistant's name, because now he's tracking like the thing that he told me to do. So he knows that he can check back in on it. Yep. Which for me is usually not checked off. But like say with our assistant, he's like, oh, I need to have her book this trip. So when we have that discussion of like, oh, we need to move this trip, we need to have this hotel moved, he'll put it under our assistant's airlock there so that he knows, number one, he needs to tell her that so he can check off telling her that. But then he keeps it there so it's something that he can on their next meeting, check in on of, oh yeah, I told her to do to move the trip. Let me confirm that the trip is moved. Because sometimes we're always delegating and moving and telling people like, hey, I need you to do this. I need you to do this. It's hard to keep track of. Right. So when he meets with her once a week, he's checking in on his airlock, the items the task items that he has given to her. He's checking in to say, have these things been completed or where are they?
Yeah. And so I want to make a really important distinction here is that the airlock is for me. Mm-hmm. Interaction updates is another note.
Yep.
That's for other people. Mm-hmm. So I'll have categories that, like, if I pull up my airlock right now, like I'll just pull it up here. So if I pull it up right now, I have a big list for myself, and then I have sections based on a business, a specific business, like one of our companies. Hey, this is personal growth content that I need to consume. So the airlock is all for me, though. I want to make that distinction because I don't think I said that correctly. So the airlock is for me. Interaction updates is what I call it, or meeting updates, whatever you call it. That's basically what it is for other people. So I just want to make that. So it's kind of two parts. So it's actually two notes.
Sorry, it used to be one and the same. It was just the airlock.
Yeah,
and now
so
this
one's for me, one's for other people. And so in the interaction or meeting updates, I'll have like my assistant meeting. I'll have you. I'll have like my handyman. I'll have like a list for him. I'll have other direct reports like my VP of operations. And just to be clear on this, if there's an action item that's quick and small, and I just want to get, like, it takes just as much time to send a voice note to one of those people that it does to write it in your phone. Mm-hmm. So if it's something that I can just send to them in a voice note, I just do it right then and there when I think about it. Mm-hmm. I do not write it down and then send it later. Mm-hmm. Okay, so I just want to make that distinction because it's so easy to just like push a button, hold it down, talk, right? Voxer, WhatsApp, voice text, however you have your comms structured in your business. Mm-hmm. And so I only write things in the meeting updates, interaction updates, part of the airlock, if I need to have a conversation with them around it.
Yeah.
Right. And so also because some people, I've noticed that like some people can capture everything that I send to them. Like I train my assistant on that huge because I'm sending her little stuff all day long. So when I have a thought for her, I don't write it down in my airlock. I just send it to her in a voice note.
Yeah.
Right?
You write it down in your airlock if you haven't heard anything about it and you're like, I wonder what the update is on that. You'll put it in the interaction.
To check in, yeah.
Yes.
So basically you're differentiating stuff for me, stuff for them, and that's essentially how the airlock works. Mm-hmm. Right? So same thing with like Twitter, right? Like if you have a thought, don't like just literally open Twitter and post it. Mm-hmm. Right? Like you don't need to write it down and then go post it later. You're just adding an extra step of friction, right? So as soon as you have a thought, like if it's appropriate, send it to the person or just publish it, right? I think that's one thing that just slows down execution when you don't just go directly. Like you could be making notes, and this is one thing that I train my assistant on because it's just she does all these little things all the time. And even as entrepreneurs, like even if you have 100 people in your team, you still have to do small administrative things because that's just a part of life. Right? Like I heard this somewhere. It was like even like the biggest entrepreneurs, like megapreneur people, like 30% of their time is on administrative stuff. Like everyone's using the same notes app. Everyone's using the same iPhone. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? Unless you've got like an EA following you around everywhere, which I'm sure some people do. And that's one thing I have considered, but I've just never really wanted it, right? Because I'm organized. And that's another way that you can do this too. Like if you have an EA and they're in your office, and they're like running your entire every little thing. Mm-hmm. Like
David Green has that.
Oh, he's like his 70s, right?
Yeah, his grandson is that, but he's always had it. He's always had the person that just follows him around because he's not going to take notes and he just says stuff and people take note of what he says.
And like our friends Russell, Josiah, Grimes, like they have an EA in their physical office that is like, hey, add this to this. Like they're taking all these little action items and they're managing, they're doing all the small things. So like the entrepreneur's not even looking at a screen. So that's like one way that you can do it. I've just never really, like I'm so efficient with this system. I've never really needed that. Mm-hmm. And then I can just send a voice note. So it probably adds like the ultimate removal of friction of like cataloging ideas. Like you could train someone to follow you around and like read you your email. Yeah. I've just never really been that person. Into that. But that's one way that you can do it. So anyway, so you're taking notes, you're looking for action items, you put them in your airlock, then you put things for other people in interaction update. And then whenever you have a meeting with that person, you go to that list and you've got the stuff you need to address with them, right? Like, this is what I need from you. And so just the system of that, like, imagine if you have that system set up, then every time you're having a conversation with somebody, every time you're at an event, like, you're looking for the action items. Like, I actually don't go back to my notes and review them.
No one ever does.
Right? And most people don't. But the reason I don't is because I'm already making the actions as I go.
Yeah.
So I don't need to go back and pull actions out.
Yeah.
I'm doing it real time. Now, you may not be that guy and you're like, hey, like, I just need to take notes and soak it in. But you got to go back later and pull the actions out. But for me, it's like, it happens in the moment. I get the ideas in the moment. And I'm like, oh, we should do that. Oh, we should do that. Oh, it comes to me and I put it right in the airlock.
It's a whole frame of listening and learning. So like, if you put on the lens of like, I'm listening to this for the action items, then it's like you hear it in a whole new way. Instead of just being like, that's good and that's good. Oh, and that's so good. And that book was so good. And it's like, well, what came out of it for you? And you're like, well, that the book was so good and I learned a lot. But this that you're talking about is like listening and learning and studying through the lens of what are the action items that I can take away. And I'll just say, like, at an event, he's being 100% honest. Like, I'll be sitting next to him at a mastermind and he has like the top of the doc is, all of the action items. And then the bottom is all of the notes. And as like someone's talking, he'll write things down that are like good one-liners of like, kings make decrees, right? That wouldn't go in the airlock. But then as someone says like, this is how you need to do this, or this is what I found out that worked, or this is what you can apply to the business. Like, that action item, the to-do, goes at the top of that doc. And then that whole list of to-dos, that whole list of action items is then moved into the airlock. Yep.
And so now it becomes okay, when do you do the things on your airlock? So a couple thoughts is, one, I'll delete stuff out.
Yeah.
So I'm like, when I go back and I'm in a planning environment. So every Sunday I sit down and I plan my week, right? Like me and you, we plan our life from a personal perspective and a business perspective every Sunday in our alignment. And that's a whole different agenda. But basically every Sunday we sit down, and for me, I'm building my priority for the week. So this is my weekly priority. And so that's on a spreadsheet. And this is a part of the operating system that we help entrepreneurs install in their business, so that every single person in the company is planning and prioritizing according to a set of standards, and which is really like
in alignment with the goal.
What adds profit and revenue, et cetera, et cetera. There's a priority list. But essentially every Sunday I sit down and now I'm like, okay, what is my weekly priority, right? And so I've got a framework that I use on a spreadsheet. It's super simple. And this is where I look at the company's strategic plan, and I look at my airlock and I pull in and create here. These are the things that I'm committed to this week in order, 1 through 10. And there's hardly ever 10. Like, usually if I can get 3 big things, important things, needle moving things, rain making things done each week, then it's a massively successful week, right? And so I look at my priority plan, weekly priority planning, and I just make that list, right? And so I'll pull from my airlock then, and I'll pull from my company's quarterly goals, metrics, deliverables, the deliverables for the business. And that's how I create my plan every single week.
Yeah. And then when you meet on Monday with the rest of the team, you're looking at your interaction updates in alignment with what they have put on their priority plan for the week.
That's right.
So you'll look at theirs, and then you'll look at the things that you have for them under interactions, and then you'll make sure that it lines up with what you think their priority should be for the week and the things that they've chosen to be priority for the week.
Right. And most of the time their priorities are already set because the company's plan is already going, the strategic planning process that we use. They already know what they're doing. They know what they're going to be doing in 2 months from now.
Yep.
Right. But there's also little things that come up, and there's things that you'll learn that you want to implement faster.
Like, hey, we just decided to do an event, so now we're adding like
yeah, like you've changed something or you've added something, which is fine, right? And so essentially that's the priority side, because you could have this giant list of stuff, but if you just pick all the little things off the top because it makes you feel good, you don't really move the needle.
Just so you can check some boxes.
Yeah, you don't really move the needle, and so that's where. And then I'll dedicate some time too. Like, if I have some free space in my calendar, I'll open up the airlock and be like, hey, I've got 20 minutes before this next meeting. Let me just knock out like 3 of these little things that I have on here that I want to get done, right? And so essentially that's the system that I used for the last decade that helped us grow a 150 employee organization that did over $200 million in sales.
Just in your Apple Notes?
That's it. Because guys, project management stuff and like, that's great for collaboration and with teams, but it's
too much friction to open up every time that you have a thought and like make a new line item and then like color code it and then like assign it to people.
It's overkill.
Like it's like you end up not doing it because there's just too much friction to do it all the time.
Yeah. So like open a note and then it shows on my iPad, it shows on my iPhone, like
your computer,
all the freaking money that we pay Apple because they're an absolute, monster of a company.
Monopoly.
Because they understand this. They're like, this is how stuff gets done, and now it's on all the devices, and it's across with one account, and it populates. So it's like using these tools, like this is really it, right? Like this is the ultimate execution system. But it's not just a to-do list, it's a mindset around how things get on it and how you move from notes to actions to priority and planning those actions to get done, right?
It's like the conveyor belt.
That's right. It's a conveyor belt, 100%. And so I'll finish off with this. So in determining priority, right? And this is going to sound like when you hear me say this, you're going to be like, duh. But like, do you actually do this? Like, do you actually do this? That's the question. So there's 5 questions in priority, right? So this is like the 5 basically, like I prioritize 1 through 5, these things. So number 1 is what adds profit and revenue. Or revenue. Profit
what makes
or revenue,
it rain?
right? Like if you look at your list of stuff for this week and there's not a list, the top 3 things don't add profit or revenue, like, or lead to profit and revenue, then why are they on the first top of the list, right? Number 2 is what reduces cost, right? What reduces cost? Like how do we increase profits, right? Number 3 is what maintains profit and revenue. That's the 3rd priority, right? What maintains profit and revenue? What keeps it around, right? Because that's not as important as new money, but recurring money is number 3, right? And then number 4 is what keeps the daily operations going, right? Because like we got to keep the boat flowing, we got to keep it rolling, we got to keep it moving. We can't let the whole system crash. We got to keep the manufacturing plan of the cars. We got to keep the cars on the line, right? And then number 5 is everything else, right? So if we've completed the stuff that adds profit and revenue, reduces cost, maintains profit and revenue, keeps the operation going, everything else is after that. And we tend to flip this upside down.
Yeah, because the other stuff is usually easier.
We tend to go, everything else, all these little crap, get
and
this
we never
done,
get to the big thing
send
that
this
actually
email,
moves the needle.
Send this text, answer this little thing. Like I have a block at the end of my day where I knock out all that little stuff, right? Like today, we came into the studio, we recorded a podcast all day long, right? And then on the drive home, right, I'm going to knock out everything else.
Yeah.
Because like I've got all these little things that I need to just deal with or send an answer to. And
that's your 4 to 5 p.m. block in the day.
Yeah, and it usually never takes me an hour, but it's usually more like 15 minutes.
It never takes you an hour. Then
Never.
why aren't you down at my dinner table at 5 p.m.?
Because I'm down in the airlock getting the rest of this stuff done. But I come down at 5 most days.
Yeah.
Most days I'm there. I'm ready to see my family. I'm ready to spend time.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
Put my phone in a freaking drawer.
Yeah.
You know, like I handled it all. Like let's just enjoy that, right?
Yeah, it's good.
So,
yeah, it's so good.
So guys, if you implement this, like it's a mindset, it's constant, it's a pulse that's always going. Like, but you need to have a system to move things forward and then prioritize them to get done. So extract the action, right? Prioritize when you do it, and then just do it, man. I don't know. I can't help you with that. If you need help just doing it, I'm like, now we need to talk about like desire, right?
Yeah.
Like that's the next, maybe that's the next show. We'll talk about desire and motivation, right? But guys, lock in the airlock.
That's like the official sound of the airlock. Whenever Brandon's like, put in the airlock, we're like,
yeah, the team always makes fun of me.
yeah, we even have like a little hand motion that's like,
It's like chambering the gun.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Sweet. Love it, guys. Hey, if this episode was great, you got value from it, drop us a review. We'd appreciate that. Share the podcast with someone, shoot them the episode. If you know someone that talks a lot and needs to execute, forward them this episode. It would make me feel warm and fuzzy inside.
Don't send it to me. Brandon's already tried.
Yeah, I manage her airlock for her.
Yes.
Yeah.
I'm like, you take so good of notes. Like when I go to events and stuff, like we left an event. He's like, what's in your notes? I'm like, bro, I stopped taking just stopped taking notes like 3 years ago. Cause you take all the notes. Why would I take notes too when you've already got all the action items?
Well, you got to read them then.
And then you're going to tell me the action items. Why do I, just like we said, no one goes back and reads their notes, babe.
I love it. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you next time, guys.
Bye.